Before I tell you this story, I need you to do 3 little things for me. And I promise, by the time this video is over, you will understand exactly why an 81-year-old Amish woman is sitting here asking you for a favor. First, tap that like button. It costs you nothing, and it tells me you are still here with me. Second, if you are new to this channel, subscribe, because I have a lot more stories like this one, and I would love for you to be sitting right here with me next time too. And third, before you get comfortable, I want you to leave a comment and tell me where in the world you are watching this from. I have had people tell me they were watching from Ohio, from Texas, from clear across the ocean in Germany and Ireland and even Australia, and every single time, it warms this old heart of mine to know my little life story traveled that far. So go on now, type it in. Tell me your city, your country, wherever you are, and then settle in. Because what I am about to tell you is something I did not tell another living soul outside my own family for almost 60 years. My husband tricked me into marrying him. That is not a figure of speech, and it is not me being cute for the camera. That man sat across the supper table from me for 58 years of marriage, and it was not until we buried his mother that I found out the truth of what he had done to get me to say yes. I laughed until I cried when I found out, and then I cried for a different reason, because by then I understood he did it out of a kind of love I did not know existed when I was 17 years old. So let me start from the beginning, because you cannot understand the trick unless you understand the girl he was tricking. My name is Naomi. I was born in the winter of 1945 on a small dairy farm outside of a town I am not going to name for you, because I still have family living there, and they would not thank me for putting our community on the map for the whole world to see. What I will tell you is that it was Amish country, the kind of place where the roads still had more buggies on them than cars when I was a girl, where the fields were so flat and so green in the summer that you could see a thunderstorm coming from 20 miles away, and where everybody in a 5-mile radius knew your name, your family, your father's temper, and how many eggs your hens laid on a good week. I was the 4th of 9 children, right in the middle, where you are either invisible or you are the one who has to raise all the little ones. And in my family, I was both. My mother used to say I came out of the womb already bossing my older sisters around. And my father used to say I came out of the womb with an opinion about everything. And neither one of them meant it as a compliment, but I took it as one anyway. We lived plain. I do not say that to make you feel sorry for us, because we were not sorry for ourselves. We did not have electricity in the house. We did not have a telephone. We did not have automobiles. And we did not want any of those things. Not really. Not the way the English children in the town wanted them, when they pressed their noses against the store windows. What we had instead was a rhythm to our days that I do not think people outside our way of life can understand unless they have lived it. Up before the sun to help with the milking, breakfast that could feed a small army, because on a farm like ours, everybody worked, and everybody who worked needed to eat like it. School until the 8th grade in a 1-room schoolhouse, with a teacher who was maybe 19 years old herself. And then after that, you were done with book learning, and you were expected to learn the things that actually mattered, which was how to run a household or how to run a farm, depending on whether the good Lord had made you a boy or a girl. I want you to picture me at 16 years old, because that is where this story really starts. I was not what anybody would call a great beauty, and I want to be honest with you about that, because so many of these old love stories on the television and in the books make it sound like the girl was always some kind of vision that every boy in the county was falling over himself to court, and that was not me. I was tall for a girl, taller than most of the boys my age, until they caught up around 17 or 18, and I had a nose that my brothers loved to tease me about, and hands that were rough from work by the time I was 12 years old. But I had a laugh that carried clear across a barn. My mother used to say she could find me in a crowd with her eyes closed just by listening for it, and I had opinions, plenty of them, and I was not shy about sharing them, which in our community was not always considered a virtue in a young woman, but I did not much care. There were 2 boys who mattered in my life when I was 16, and I suppose that is really where I need to begin. The first was a boy named Jonas Byler, and if I am being honest with you, Jonas was the one I had my eye on. Jonas was the kind of boy who made every girl at the Sunday singings go quiet when he walked in, tall and broad through the shoulders from working his father's horse farm, with a way of smiling that made you feel like you were the only person in the room, even when he was smiling at 3 other girls at the same time. Which, looking back on it now with 81 years of wisdom behind me, should have told me something important about Jonas Byler that I was too young and too foolish to see at the time. The second boy was Eli Zook, and Eli was, in almost every way that mattered to a 16-year-old girl trying to decide who she liked, the opposite of Jonas. Eli was not the tallest boy in our youth group. He was not the strongest, though he was plenty strong. Farm boys always were. He did not have that easy way of talking that drew a crowd around him. Eli was quiet. Eli was the kind of boy who sat at the edge of the gathering and watched more than he talked. And when he did talk, it was usually something so dry and so unexpected that it would catch you off guard and make you laugh before you even realized what he had said was funny. I had known Eli my whole life, the way you know everybody in a small community, but I had never once thought of him as anything other than one of the Zook boys, the second oldest of 6, whose father ran the sawmill, and whose mother made the best shoofly pie in 3 church districts, and that is the honest truth. Not just something I say now because I loved the woman for 40 years as my mother-in-law. So there I was, 16 years old, mooning after Jonas Byler at every Sunday singing, and there was Eli Zook, sitting on the edge of things, watching, and I did not think one thing about it, not for a long while. And that, my friends, is exactly where the trick begins, though it would take me another 60 years to understand it. Now, for those of you watching this who are not familiar with Amish courting customs, let me explain a little, because you cannot understand how a trick like this could even happen unless you understand how differently we did things back then, and honestly, how differently many of our young people still do things today. We did not date the way English young people dated, going out to the picture show or driving around in a car with the radio playing. Our courtship happened mostly at what we called the Sunday singings. After the church service, which would be held at somebody's farm since we did not have church buildings, the young people who were of courting age, generally 16 and up, would gather in the evening at that same farm, usually in the barn if the weather was nice, and we would sing hymns and folk songs for hours. And in between the singing, that was where all the real business of the evening happened. That was where a boy would work up the nerve to ask a girl if he could drive her home in his buggy afterward. And let me tell you, that question, simple as it sounds, carried more weight in our world than any fancy proposal you might see in one of these English romance movies. If a boy asked to take you home, and you said yes, that was known throughout the whole young folks' crowd within about a day and a half. I promise you, faster than any of these modern telephones could spread news. And if a boy asked you home more than once, well, that was practically an announcement to the whole church district that something was happening between the 2 of you. So you can imagine, at 16 years old, with my eye on Jonas Byler, how much attention I was paying to who was asking who home from the singings, and how carefully I positioned myself near the door at the end of the evening, hoping it would be Jonas who came looking for me. The first few singings of that particular summer, Jonas did not ask me home. He asked a girl named Sarah Esch home twice, and I will admit to you now, 81 years old and long past any foolishness of jealousy, that I was not kind in my heart about Sarah Esch that summer. I said things about her to my sisters that I am not proud of. I told myself she was too forward, that she batted her eyes too much, that she was not really as pretty as everyone said, and none of it was true, not one word of it. She was a perfectly lovely girl who went on to marry a good man from 2 districts over and raised 7 children, and by all accounts had a wonderful life, and I was simply a jealous 16-year-old who wanted what she had. I tell you this because I think it is important, in telling this story honestly, that you understand I was not some saint waiting patiently for love to find her. I was a normal girl with a normal amount of foolishness in her heart, and that foolishness is going to matter later in this story. All this time, while I was watching Jonas and fuming about Sarah Esch, Eli Zook was at every single singing, sitting in his usual spot, never once asking a girl home that whole summer. At least not that I noticed, and I want to be truthful with you. I did not notice much of anything Eli did that summer, because I was so busy watching Jonas. It was my older sister Katie who first said something to me about it. Katie was 2 years older than me, and had already been asked home by a young man named Amish Stoltzfus more times than any of us could count, and everyone in the family knew it was only a matter of time before there was a wedding announcement. Katie had a way of seeing things clearly that I did not have at 16, and one evening as we were walking home from a quilting frolic, she said to me, "Naomi, have you ever noticed how Eli Zook watches you at the singings?" And I remember laughing at her, actually laughing right out loud there on the road, because the idea seemed so strange to me. I said, "Eli Zook does not watch anybody. Eli Zook watches his own boots." And Katie just smiled this little smile that older sisters get when they know something you do not know yet, and she said, "That is not what I have seen." I did not think much more about it that night, but I will tell you, once somebody plants a thought like that in your head, you cannot quite unplant it. The next Sunday singing, without meaning to, I found myself glancing over at Eli's spot at the edge of the gathering more than once, and I want to tell you honestly, I did catch him looking my direction a time or two, but I told myself it was nothing, that he was probably looking at whoever was standing near me, or that he had simply glanced my way by accident the way your eyes do when you are scanning a crowded room. 16-year-old girls, and I imagine this has not changed in 80 years no matter what year you are watching this video. 16-year-old girls are experts at explaining away the very things that are staring them right in the face. That whole summer went on that way, me pining after Jonas, who asked me home exactly one time, right at the very end of August, and I remember thinking my whole world had changed, that finally he had noticed me, and it was the most wonderful buggy ride of my young life up to that point. Even though, looking back on it now, Jonas talked mostly about his father's horses, and barely asked me a single question about myself the entire ride. But I did not care. I was 16, and he was handsome, and he had chosen me, if only for one night, and that was enough to keep me dreaming for weeks. But here is the thing I did not know, the thing I would not find out until decades later, sitting at my mother-in-law's funeral luncheon of all places. That same week that Jonas finally asked me home, Eli Zook had gone to his own father and asked him a question that would end up changing the entire course of my life, though I would not know it for 2 more years. I did not know it then, but I am going to tell you now, because it is too good a piece of the story to make you wait for, even though I myself had to wait 60 years to hear it. Eli went to his father, Amish Zook, the sawmill owner, and he said, "Dad, I know who I am going to marry." And his father, who by all accounts laughed so hard he nearly choked on his coffee, said, "Is that so? And who might that be?" And Eli said, "Naomi Fisher, though she does not know it yet." His father asked him how he could possibly know such a thing at 16 years old, and Eli said something that his father repeated to my husband's mother that very night, and that she repeated to me at her own son's funeral supper decades later, laughing and crying at the same time as she said it. Eli told his father, "I have watched her with her little brothers and sisters, and I have watched how she is when she thinks nobody important is looking, and that is the woman I want to grow old with. Not Jonas Byler's woman. Mine now." If you had told me at 16 years old that quiet Eli Zook had already decided, before I had ever really looked at him twice, that he was going to marry me, I would have laughed you clear out of the county. But that is exactly what happened, and here is the part that makes this whole story what it is. Eli did not march up to me and declare his intentions. He did not write me a bold letter or challenge Jonas Byler to some kind of contest for my affections like you might see in one of these silly English romance stories. No, Eli Zook, quiet, patient, watching his own boots Eli Zook, decided that if I was ever going to choose him, I needed to believe it was entirely my own idea and my own choice, and that is where this whole long, slow, remarkable trick of his began. For the rest of that year and into the next, Eli did something so simple that I never once suspected it for what it was. He became my friend, not my suitor, mind you. Nothing that anybody in the community would have whispered about. Just my friend. He started helping his older brother, David, with deliveries from the sawmill to different farms in the district. And it just so happened, or so I thought at the time, that an awful lot of those deliveries brought him past our farm right around the time I would be out doing evening chores. He would stop the wagon, and we would talk for 10 minutes, sometimes 20 if my father was not around to notice how long the conversation was running, about nothing much at all. About the weather, about which cow was giving the most trouble, about a book I had read, because even though I only had an 8th grade education like everybody else, I loved to read anything I could get my hands on, and Eli was the same way, and it turned out we had that in common, something I never would have guessed about the quiet boy who sat at the edge of the singings. I want to be honest with you, because I promised myself when I sat down to make this video that I would tell you the truth of this story, and not some polished-up version of it. During that whole first year of what I now understand was Eli's slow and patient courtship of me, I still thought about Jonas Byler plenty. I still watched the door at the singings, hoping he would come find me again. He did ask me home 2 more times that next year, and both times my heart about beat clear out of my chest with excitement, and both times, the very next week, I would notice Eli's wagon rolling up our farm lane right around evening chore time, like clockwork, like nothing at all had happened, like he had not heard a single word about Jonas Byler asking me home again, though of course he had heard. Everybody heard everything in our community, and I understand now that he heard it, and it must have stung him something fierce. And he never once let on. Not by so much as a change in his tone of voice. My sister Katie, who by this time was engaged to Amish Stoltzfus and set to be married that fall, used to shake her head at me and say, "Naomi, you are the only girl in 3 districts who cannot see what is standing right in front of her." And I would tell her she did not know what she was talking about, that Eli Zook was just a friend. That there was nothing between us but conversation about cows and books. And she would just laugh that same knowing laugh she always had and go back to whatever quilt she was working on for her hope chest. Katie's wedding that fall was, in a strange way, a turning point for me, though I did not understand it at the time. It was a massive event, the way our weddings always were, with 200 guests and enough food to feed the whole county twice over. And I remember standing in the corner of my parents' farmhouse, which had been transformed for the day with benches from the church wagon and long tables set up in the yard, watching my sister marry the man she loved, and feeling something twist up in my stomach that I did not have a name for. It was not jealousy exactly, though there was some of that in it. Watching my older sister step into a life of her own while I was still just a girl living under my father's roof. It was something more like a hunger, a wanting, though I could not have told you at 17 years old exactly what it was I was wanting. Eli was at that wedding, of course. Everybody in the district was. And I remember at one point during the evening meal, after the tables had been cleared for the young folks to sing, I found myself sitting near him, not because I had planned it, but because that is simply how the benches had been arranged, and we got to talking, the way we always talked, easy and unhurried. And at some point in the conversation I looked over at him, and I noticed, really noticed for the first time, the way the lantern light caught the side of his face, and I felt that same twisting hunger in my stomach that I had felt watching my sister get married. Except now it had a direction to it. Now it was pointed at something, or rather someone, and that someone was sitting right beside me, eating a piece of Katie's wedding cake like nothing at all unusual was happening. I did not say anything about it to anybody, not even Katie, because I did not fully understand it myself yet, and because I still had this stubborn, foolish notion in the back of my mind that what I really wanted was Jonas Byler, even though Jonas Byler had not asked me home from a singing in over 4 months by that point, having taken up, rather seriously, with a girl from the neighboring district named Fanny Lapp, a fact that everybody knew, and that everybody was somehow too polite to mention to me directly, though I am quite certain half the young women in our youth group were talking about it behind my back, with no small amount of pity. It was that winter, the winter after Katie's wedding, when the first strange little thing happened, the thing that set the whole trick in motion, though of course I did not know that is what it was at the time. I began finding small folded notes tucked into places only I would think to look. One was inside the pages of a book I had borrowed from the little lending library the schoolteacher kept in town. One was tucked into the lid of my sewing basket. One was pressed between the pages of my Bible, right at the Book of Ruth, which I did not think was any kind of accident even at the time, though I could not have told you why it felt significant. The notes were never signed. They were short, sometimes just a line or two, a thought about something we had talked about, or a little observation. Once a pressed flower with the words "This made me think of you," and nothing else. And I want you to understand, in a community where courting was done so carefully and so publicly, where every buggy ride home was practically a public announcement, these secret little notes felt like something out of a storybook, something scandalous and wonderful all at once. I spent that entire winter trying to figure out who was leaving them. I will tell you now, with no small amount of embarrassment even after all these years, that my first guess was Jonas Byler, even though by that point he was as good as engaged to Fanny Lapp, because some foolish part of my heart wanted so badly for it to be him that I convinced myself he must have realized his mistake and was trying to win me back in secret. I asked my sister Katie what she thought, showing her one of the notes, and she read it over very carefully and said, "Naomi, I do not think this is Jonas Byler's handwriting, and when I asked her how she would even know Jonas Byler's handwriting, she got a strange little look on her face and changed the subject. And I understand now, all these years later, that Katie almost certainly knew exactly who was leaving those notes, because Katie's husband Amos and Eli were close friends, thick as thieves, the two of them, and I would not be surprised one bit if Amos had been recruited into the whole scheme, sneaking notes into places for his young sister-in-law, without her ever suspecting the two men in her life who saw each other every single week at the sawmill. The notes went on for nearly 4 months, all through that winter and into the early spring, and I confess to you now that I fell a little bit in love with whoever was writing them. This mysterious person who seemed to know exactly the right thing to say to make me feel seen in a way I had never quite felt before. Not even during that one glorious buggy ride with Jonas Byler. I began looking at every young man in our youth group a little differently, wondering, could it be you? Could it be you? And all the while, Eli Zook kept right on stopping his delivery wagon at our farm at evening chore time, talking to me about cows and books and nothing at all important, giving no more indication that he was anything other than my friend than he ever had. It was my own father, of all people, who finally gave me the first real clue, though he did not mean to. It was early spring, and I was helping him mend a section of fence along the east pasture, and out of nowhere, with no lead up at all, he said to me that Zook boy has a good head on his shoulders. I did not think much of it in the moment, just nodded and kept working. But that night, lying in bed, I turned the comment over and over in my mind, because my father was not a man who offered up compliments about young men to his daughters without some kind of reason. My father was a practical man, and if he was thinking about Eli Zook's head and shoulders in relation to me, it meant something had already been discussed somewhere that I was not privy to. I did not sleep well that night, I will tell you that. Part of me was thrilled at the idea, because somewhere over that long winter of mysterious notes and quiet evening conversations, my feelings toward Eli had shifted into something I had not fully admitted to myself yet. That hunger I had felt at Katie's wedding had only grown stronger every time his wagon rolled up our lane. Every time he laughed at something I said in that low, surprised way of his, like he could not quite believe how funny I was and loved it anyway. But another part of me was almost afraid of the idea, because if my father was already thinking about Eli Zook in that way, it meant things were moving faster than I had realized, faster than I had any control over. And I was not entirely certain, not yet, whether I was ready for that. It was maybe 2 weeks after that fence-mending conversation that everything came to a head. And this is the part of the story, my friends, where the real trick finally shows itself, so I hope you are still with me. Because I promised you I would tell it to you honestly. And the honest truth is that what my husband did next was either the most romantic thing anybody had ever done for me, or the most audacious piece of manipulation I had ever encountered in my young life. And to this day, 81 years old, I still go back and forth on which one it really was. And I suspect it was probably both at once. Which I have come to believe is true of most great love stories if you look at them closely enough. There was a singing at the end of that spring, held at the Lapp farm, the very same family that Jonas Byler's Fanny belonged to, which I remember thinking was a strange sort of full circle even at the time. It was a warm evening, one of the first truly warm evenings after a long winter, and the barn doors were thrown wide open, and we sang until well past dark. And I remember feeling lighter that night than I had felt in months, though I could not have told you exactly why. When the singing ended and the young people began to pair off and drift toward the buggies lined up along the lane, I found myself, quite by accident or so I believed at the time, standing near the barn door at the exact moment Eli Zook walked up to me. Now, understand, Eli had never once in all the months and months of our friendship asked to take me home from a singing. We had talked at dozens of these gatherings. We had spent who knows how many hours together on his delivery route. But he had never once made that particular, weighted, meaningful request that every young person in our world understood carried more significance than almost anything else you could say to another person. So when he walked up to me that night and said, quiet as always, "Naomi, would you let me drive you home?" my heart about stopped in my chest. I said yes. Of course I said yes. Though I remember my voice came out strange and small, nothing like my usual self, and we walked together out to his buggy, and I do not remember one single thing about that ride home. Not one word we said to each other, because I was so overwhelmed by the moment itself that I could not tell you now if we talked about the weather or the price of milk or the end of the world. I simply do not remember, and that has always struck me as a funny thing. That the ride I had waited so long for, without even fully admitting to myself that I was waiting for it, is the one detail of that whole spring I cannot recall. What I do remember with perfect clarity, even now, is what happened the following week, and the week after that, and the week after that. Because Eli asked to drive me home from every single singing for the rest of that spring and into the summer. Without exception, 4 weeks running, and in our community, my friends, 4 weeks running was not a small thing. 3 weeks running was already enough to set tongues wagging throughout the whole district. 4 weeks running meant something had been decided, at least in the eyes of everyone watching, even if the two people involved had not said one single word to each other about what exactly that something was. I want to explain to you why this matters so much to the story I am telling, because I think if you did not grow up in our world, it might be hard to understand the weight of what happened next. In our community, back in those years, and to a large degree still today, a young man did not simply announce his intentions to marry a girl the way you might see in an English movie, going down on one knee with a ring and some grand romantic gesture. The path toward marriage was built slowly, through these small, quiet, deeply understood signals. The asking home, the repeated asking home, the visiting on Sunday afternoons, and eventually, privately, a direct conversation between the two young people about whether they wished to be published, which was our word for having the bishop announce your engagement to the whole church district, usually just a few weeks before the wedding itself. What Eli did, and I did not understand this until much, much later, was he skipped several of those slow, careful steps, or rather, he made it look to the entire community as though those steps had already happened, before he and I had ever once spoken directly about marriage, by asking me home 4 weeks running, right after that whole winter of mysterious notes, right after my own father had made his little comment about Eli's good head on his shoulders. Eli created a situation where the entire church district, my own parents included, began operating under the assumption that Naomi Fisher and Eli Zook were, for all practical purposes, a couple who intended to marry, long before Eli had ever formally asked me anything at all. I found this out in the most startling way possible. It was a Sunday afternoon in early July, and my mother came to find me while I was out in the garden picking beans, and she sat down on the little stool beside me, the one my father had built for exactly that purpose, low-picking work, and she said, without any preamble at all, "Your father and I have been talking with Amos and Lydia Zook," meaning Eli's parents, "and we think a fall wedding would suit well, before the weather turns." I remember I nearly dropped the whole basket of beans right there in the dirt. I said, "Mama, nobody has asked me anything. and my mother looked at me with this expression I will never forget. This mix of confusion and gentle amusement. And she said, "Naomi, he has been asking you home every week for a month. What do you think that means?" And I said, "But he has not asked me to marry him, Mama. He has only asked to drive me home." And my mother, bless her heart, actually laughed out loud right there in the garden, and said, "Child, in this community, that is the asking. Everyone has understood it that way for a month now. Did you truly think he was just being neighborly?" I sat there in the garden dirt with a basket of half-picked beans, and I felt about 100 different things at once. I felt embarrassed, because apparently I had been the very last person in the entire church district to understand what everyone else already knew. I felt something close to anger, because it seemed to me, in that first hot moment, that Eli had gone behind my back somehow, had let the whole community draw its own conclusions without ever once checking with me directly about whether those conclusions were correct. And underneath all of that, if I am honest with you, and I promised you honesty in this video, underneath all of that, I felt something warm and unmistakable. Because the truth was, by that point, after that whole winter of secret notes and all those quiet evening conversations at the fence line, after that hunger I had felt at my sister's wedding finally finding somewhere to land, the truth was, I wanted to marry Eli Zook. I simply had not said the words out loud yet, not even to myself. And here was the entire community, my own parents included, moving forward as though I already had. I marched myself over to the Zook farm that very evening, which was not at all the sort of thing a proper young woman did in our community, showing up unannounced and uninvited to speak to a young man directly. But I was 17 years old, and my pride was wounded, and I did not much care what was proper in that moment. I found Eli out by the sawmill, cleaning up after the day's work, and I said, without any greeting at all, "Eli Zook, my mother tells me we are to be married in the fall, and I would like to know when exactly you intended to ask me about that." Now, I want you to understand something about my husband, something that took me many years of marriage to fully appreciate, and it is this. Eli Zook did not rattle easily. He set down the broom he had been holding, and he looked at me with those calm gray eyes of his, and he said, "Naomi, I have been asking you every week for a month. I simply asked it a way I thought you would say yes to." I did not understand what he meant right away, and I told him so, and he explained it to me, plain and simple, the way he explained everything, standing there in the sawdust with the evening light coming through the mill windows. He said, if I had walked up to you straight out and said, "Naomi, will you marry me?" I believe you would have said you needed time to think on it, because that is the kind of woman you are, careful and thoughtful, and not easily rushed into anything, which he said was one of the things he admired most about me. But he said he had watched me for 2 years, and he had come to understand something about me that I had perhaps not fully understood about myself, which was that I moved forward best when I was moving forward with everybody around me moving in the same direction, that I trusted the community's judgment even when I doubted my own. And so, he said he had simply arranged things so that by the time I had to make my decision, I would already know, in my heart, watching how naturally everyone around me had accepted the idea, whether it was the right decision or not. I stood there in that sawmill for a long moment, working through what he had just told me, and I will admit my first instinct was to be furious with him, because it did sound, laid out plainly like that, like a kind of manipulation, like he had used his understanding of my character against me, rather than simply trusting me to make up my own mind in my own time. And I said something like that to him, sharp and hot, and he listened to the whole thing without once interrupting me, which was very much his way, and when I was finished, he said something I have carried with me for the rest of my life, 64 years now since that evening in the sawmill. He said, "Naomi, I did not decide for you. I only made certain you would not talk yourself out of something you already wanted, the same way you have been talking yourself out of it in your own head for 2 winters running." And there it was. Because he was right, and I knew he was right the moment he said it, and that is the part of this story I find hardest to explain to people, even now. Eli had not tricked me into loving him. I already loved him. I had loved him for a long while by that point, if I am honest with myself about it. Ever since that lantern light at Katie's wedding, maybe even before that, if I go back and think honestly about all those winter evenings at the fence line. What Eli had tricked was my own stubbornness, my own foolish, prideful insistence on holding out for some grand romantic gesture like the ones I had heard about in stories. Some moment where a man declared himself boldly, and I got to make a dramatic decision in front of everyone. He understood that I would have kept him waiting, kept myself waiting, kept us both stuck in that in-between place for who knows how much longer, out of nothing more than pure stubbornness, if he had given me the chance to. I stood there in that sawdust a long moment more, and then, because I did not know what else to do with the swirl of feelings inside me, I laughed. I laughed right out loud, the same laugh my mother always said she could find me by in a crowded room. And Eli looked at me with such a startled expression, because I do not think he was entirely certain, up until that moment, whether I was about to cry or shout at him or turn around and walk straight back home and never speak to him again. And I said, "Eli Zook, if you ever try a stunt like this again in 50 years of marriage, I will make you sleep in the barn with the horses." And he said, very seriously, so seriously that it took me a moment to realize he was teasing me. "Understood, ma'am." And that was that. That was how Eli Zook and Naomi Fisher became engaged to be married, standing in a sawdust-covered mill, with the evening light slanting through the windows, with no ring, no bent knee, no grand speech. Just 2 young people, finally saying out loud what an entire community had already decided for them weeks before. We were published 2 Sundays later, which meant the bishop stood up in front of the whole congregation and announced our intention to marry, and I will tell you, sitting there on the women's side of the church while old Bishop Miller read our names, I felt a kind of settling in my chest, a rightness, that told me whatever trick Eli had pulled to get us to that moment, he had not been wrong about what was in my own heart. We were married that November, right after the harvest, at my parents' farm, with the same benches and tables set up in the yard that had been used for my sister Katie's wedding 2 years before. And if you have never been to an Amish wedding, I will tell you it is a long day. Church service in the morning that can run 3 hours or more. Then the noon meal. Then more singing and visiting well into the evening. And by the time Eli and I finally climbed into his buggy that night to drive to the little house on his family's land, where we would begin our married life together, I was more tired than I had ever been in my whole 17 years, and happier than I had ever been too, both at the very same time. I want to pause the story here for just a moment and remind you, if you have not done it yet, go ahead and tap that like button, and if you have not subscribed, now is a good time, because we are only getting started. There is a lot more to this story, including the part where I finally learned the whole truth about those notes, decades later, at a funeral of all places. And I do not want you to miss it. And keep those comments coming too. I am loving reading where all of you are watching from tonight. Now, back to the story. Married life on a small Amish dairy farm in the 1960s was not easy, and I do not want to paint you some kind of picture postcard of endless happiness, because that would not be honest, and I promised you honesty. Our first years of marriage were hard years. We lived in a small house on a corner of Eli's father's land, 2 rooms downstairs and a sleeping loft above. No running water in the house for the first 3 years. And I hauled water from the well every single morning before the sun came up. Same as my own mother had done. Same as her mother before her. Eli worked the sawmill with his father and brothers during the week, and worked our own small patch of land in whatever hours were left. And some weeks I hardly saw him awake for more than a few hours a day. Both of us so tired from our own work that we would sit at the supper table together and barely manage a full conversation before one of us was nodding off. Our first child, a daughter we named Elizabeth after Eli's grandmother, came the following autumn, less than a year after our wedding, and I remember thinking, holding her for the first time in that little house with no running water, that I had never in my life felt so tired and so complete all at the same time. She was followed, over the next 14 years, by 7 more children, 6 of whom lived to grow up, which was, sad as it is to say, a good outcome for a family in our community and our era. Though I will not pretend to you that losing our 3rd child, a little boy we named Amish after Eli's father, who did not survive his 2nd winter, was anything less than the hardest thing either of us had ever gone through up to that point in our lives. I do not want to dwell on that particular sorrow too long in this video, because it is not really what this story is about, but I would not be telling you the truth of our marriage if I left it out entirely. Because it was in that sorrow, more than in any of the happy years, that I came to understand the true measure of the man I had married. Eli did not have many words for grief. That was never his way. But on the night we buried our little Amos, after all the family had gone home and the house was finally quiet, he sat with me on the edge of our bed for hours, not saying anything at all, just holding my hand in that big rough hand of his, and every so often he would press it a little tighter, like he was making sure I knew he was still there, still with me. And I want to tell you, that silence meant more to me than any words could have. There is a kind of love that shows itself in grand gestures, the secret notes, the clever tricks, the sweeping speeches. And there is a kind of love that shows itself simply by sitting beside you in the dark and not leaving. And I came to understand, over 58 years of marriage, that Eli Zook was capable of both kinds, and that the second kind was really the truer measure of the man. The years rolled on the way years do, and I do not want to spend this whole video walking you through every single one of them, but I do want to give you a sense of the shape of our life together, because I think it matters to understanding how I felt when I finally learned the truth about those winter notes. We raised our 6 living children on that farm, watched it grow from the small 2-room house with no running water into a proper farmhouse once Eli's father passed and left us the main house and the bulk of the land, since Eli was the son who had stayed closest to home and worked the farm alongside him the longest. We went through droughts that nearly broke us and years so abundant we did not know what to do with all the extra milk and produce. We buried both of Eli's parents and both of mine over the years, and each time Eli held my hand the same way he had the night we buried our Amos. Quiet, steady, present. We watched our children marry one by one, watched grandchildren come, then great-grandchildren, watched the world outside our community change in ways that sometimes worried us and sometimes did not touch us at all, tucked away as we were in our own steady rhythm of seasons and chores and church Sundays. Through all of it, Eli and I built the kind of marriage that I think a lot of young people today, both inside our community and outside of it, might find hard to imagine. Not because it was without struggle. Every marriage has its struggles, and ours certainly did. There were years we argued more than we agreed. Years when the weight of raising 6 children and running a farm wore both of us down to short tempers and long silences that were not the comfortable kind. But because, underneath all of it, there was never one single day in 58 years of marriage that I doubted Eli Zook wanted me, specifically me, sitting across the supper table from him. And I think that certainty, more than any romance or excitement, is what carried us through the hard years. Because I always knew, whatever trick he might have pulled to get me to that supper table in the first place, that the wanting itself had never once been a trick at all. Now let me finally tell you about the funeral, because I know some of you have been waiting for me to circle back around to it since I mentioned it near the beginning of this video. Eli's mother, Lydia Zook, the woman who made the best choufle pie in 3 church districts, passed away 11 years ago now, when Eli and I were both 70 years old, and Lydia herself was 94, which in our community is considered a full and blessed life, and it was, by all accounts, a peaceful passing. She simply did not wake up one morning, her heart having decided, after 94 years of faithful service, that it had done enough work. The funeral was a large affair, as they always are in our community, and afterward there was the traditional meal at the family home, tables full of casseroles and pies brought by every family in the district. The kind of meal where grief and gratitude and gossip all sit together at the same table, which I have always found to be one of the strangest and most human things about funerals. That within an hour of burying somebody you love, you find yourself laughing at some old story about them, with a plate of funeral potatoes balanced on your knee. I was sitting with several of the older women from the district, Eli's younger sister Ruth among them, and somehow, the way conversation drifts at these gatherings, the talk turned to old memories of Lydia. What a clever woman she had been. How she used to help organize half the courtships in the district without anybody quite realizing she was doing it. And Ruth, who by that point was 71 years old herself, and had never once in 50 years given away this particular secret, looked at me with a strange little smile and said, "Naomi, did Eli ever tell you it was Ma'am who wrote those notes for him?" I nearly choked on my funeral potatoes. I said, "What notes, Ruth?" Though of course I knew exactly which notes she meant the moment the words left her mouth, because there had only ever been one set of mysterious notes in my whole life, and I had thought about them, on and off, for over 50 years by that point, wondering, in the back of my mind, whether Eli himself had written them, though he had never once confirmed it, and I had never once pressed him on it. Some part of me content to let that particular piece of our story stay a little bit of a mystery. Ruth told me the whole thing, right there over funeral potatoes and choufle pie, with Eli sitting not 10 feet away talking farm equipment with 2 of his sons, having no idea, I am quite sure, that his little sister was about to tell his wife of over 50 years, a secret he had apparently kept even from her all that time. Ruth told me that Eli had come to their mother back when he was only 16 years old, and told her the very same thing he had told his father at the sawmill, that he had already decided he was going to marry Naomi Fisher, and that he needed her help. Because, in his own words as Ruth remembered them, Eli did not trust himself to say the right things on paper. He was not a man of many words, never had been, and he was afraid that whatever he might write to me himself would come out stiff and awkward, and would not properly communicate what he actually felt. So Lydia Zook, who I had loved for 40 years by that point, has a wonderful mother-in-law who had never once, not one single time in all our years together, let on that she had any part in this whole scheme, had sat with her 16-year-old son on winter evenings at their kitchen table and helped him find the words for those notes, sometimes writing them herself in a hand disguised to look different from her own everyday handwriting, sometimes coaching Eli through writing them himself in his careful, deliberate way. It was Lydia who suggested the pressed flower at the Book of Ruth. Ruth told me, because Lydia had thought it was a clever, quiet way of saying something without saying it outright. A young widow choosing to stay with the family she had married into. Though of course I was no widow. I understood the reference differently as a girl, thinking only of loyalty and staying close to the people who mattered. I sat there at that funeral table with my mouth hanging open for I do not know how long, and Ruth just kept right on going, telling me how it was actually Amos Stoltzfus, my own sister Katie's husband, who had helped deliver several of the notes, slipping them to me under the pretense of returning borrowed books or tools, exactly as I had suspected all those years ago, though I had never once managed to prove it. And how it was Lydia, again, who had quietly suggested to my own mother, over a shared afternoon of canning tomatoes that summer, that a fall wedding might suit the young folks well, planting that very seed that my mother had brought to me in the garden that July afternoon. I do not remember exactly what I said to Ruth in that moment, some kind of stunned nothing, I am sure, but I remember very clearly what I did next, which was set down my plate of funeral potatoes, walk straight across that crowded room full of grieving, gossiping, pie-eating relatives, and plant myself directly in front of my husband of 53 years, right in the middle of his conversation about farm equipment with our sons, and say, "Eli Zook, your mother wrote my love notes." Now I want you to understand, at 70 years old, having weathered 53 years of marriage together, my husband had gotten very good. Over the decades, at reading exactly how much trouble he was in based on my tone of voice, and I could see him doing the calculation right there in front of me, weighing whether this was going to be a laughing matter or a genuine problem, and I watched this slow, careful smile spread across his face, the same patient, unbothered expression he had worn, standing in that sawdust-covered Mill 50 3 years earlier. And he said, and I remember this word for word because I have thought about it many, many times since. He said, "Naomi, my mother wrote the words. I wrote the meaning. There is a difference." Our sons, who had no idea what we were talking about, looked back and forth between the two of us like we had both lost our minds a little, and I will admit, standing there in the middle of that crowded funeral gathering, surrounded by casseroles and grieving relatives, I laughed. I laughed the same laugh I had laughed in that sawmill more than 50 years before. The laugh my mother always said she could find me by, and several people turned to look, probably wondering what on earth could be so funny at a funeral, and Eli reached out and took my hand, right there in front of everyone. An old man and an old woman holding hands like a couple of teenagers, and he said, quiet enough that only I could hear it. "I have been waiting 11 years for the right moment to tell you that story myself, and my sister just went and ruined my surprise." That, my friends, is when I finally understood the full shape of the trick my husband had played on me. 61 years earlier now, if you count from that first winter of secret notes. And I want to walk you through what I came to understand, sitting with it in the weeks and months after that funeral, because I think it matters more than the story itself. Eli Zook did not trick me into loving him. I want to be very clear about that, because I do not want anybody watching this video to walk away thinking this is a story about manipulation dressed up as romance. though I understand why the title might make you wonder that. What Eli did was recognize something true about me, at 16 years old, before I had even fully recognized it about myself. And then he spent 2 full years quietly, patiently, and yes, with a good deal of cleverness and even a little bit of family conspiracy thrown in, building a path toward that truth that I could walk down without tripping over my own stubbornness and pride along the way. He enlisted his mother because he understood his own limitations, that he was not a man who found words easily, and rather than let that limitation stand between us, he found a way around it that still, in the end, delivered his own true feelings, just carried on someone else's pen. He orchestrated the 4 weeks of asking me home because he understood that I trusted the wisdom of my community more than I trusted my own racing, uncertain heart, and he gave that community a reason to make the decision look obvious before I had fully made it myself. I have thought long and hard in the years since that funeral about whether what Eli did was right, and I want to share those thoughts with you now. Because I know some of you watching this video come from a very different world than the one I grew up in, and I imagine some of you might hear this story and feel a little bit uncomfortable with it, might think, that does not sound like consent. That sounds like a young woman being managed rather than courted, and I want to take that concern seriously, because it is not a foolish one. Here is what I have come to believe, after 81 years on this earth and 58 years of marriage to the man in question. There is a real and important difference between somebody shaping the circumstances around a choice and somebody making the choice for you. Eli never once told me I had to marry him. He never once used pressure or guilt or threats. He never once did anything that would have trapped me if I had truly wanted to say no. If I had stood in that garden that July afternoon and told my mother, plainly, that I did not want to marry Eli Zirk, that whole quiet architecture he had built over 2 years would have come apart. And I do believe, knowing the man as I came to know him over the following decades, that he would have accepted it, with a broken heart perhaps, but he would have accepted it, and he would not have held it against me. And he certainly would not have tried to trap me into something I did not want. What he did instead was remove the obstacles that stood between me and a truth I already carried in my own heart. My stubbornness, my pride, my foolish insistence on holding out for some grander romantic gesture that existed mostly in storybooks and had very little to do with the kind of steady, patient love that actually builds a good marriage. He saw those obstacles clearly, more clearly than I saw them myself at 17. And he built a path around them. And at every single step along that path, the choice remained mine to make. I could have turned around at the sawmill and told him I did not want any part of what he had arranged. I could have refused to be published. I could have called off the wedding right up until the moment the bishop pronounced us man and wife. I did none of those things, not because I was tricked into staying quiet, but because, every single step of the way, some deep and honest part of me recognized that what he was offering was exactly what I wanted, even when the louder, more stubborn part of me was still busy mooning after Jonas Byler and his easy smile. I think, if I am being honest with you, that this is the real difference between the kind of trick my husband played on me and the kind of trickery that actually harms people. A trick that reveals you to yourself is a very different thing from a trick that hides the truth from you or forces you into something false. Eli's whole scheme, from the secret notes to the 4 weeks of asking me home, was built entirely around helping me see something true, not around convincing me of something false. And I think that is worth sitting with, however you come down on the question of whether it was right for him to do it the way he did. Before I go on, I want to check in with you again because I know these videos can run long, and sometimes people wander off partway through. And I would hate for you to miss the rest of what I have to say, because I think the second half of this story is actually the more important half. So if you are still here with me, drop a comment and let me know what part of the story has surprised you the most so far. Was it the secret notes? Was it the 4 weeks of buggy rides? Was it finding out my own mother-in-law had a hand in the whole scheme? I read every single comment on these videos. My granddaughter helps me get onto the computer most evenings, and I promise you I will be looking for your answers. And if you have not liked this video yet, now would be a wonderful time. It truly does help this old woman's little channel find its way to more people who might enjoy hearing these stories. And if you are not subscribed, well, there is a button somewhere on your screen for that too, and I would be glad to have you along for the next story. Now, I want to talk for a little while about how different courtship looks today compared to how it looked when I was 17 years old, because I know a good number of you watching this are not from our community at all. You are English, as we say, meaning simply not Amish. And I understand that your world does not work the way mine did. You have these telephones now that fit in your pocket, and from what my grandchildren tell me, and some of them have left our community and live out in the English world now, which is its own long story for another day. You can find a person to court with nothing more than swiping your finger across a little picture of their face. I do not say this to judge you. Understand, every generation finds love in the tools it has been given. And I am sure there were old women in my own grandmother's time who looked at our Sunday singings and thought we had lost all sense of proper courtship compared to whatever quieter, more formal customs they had known in their own youth. But I will tell you what I think has been lost, a little, in all this speed and convenience. And it is something I think about often now that I am old enough to look back over the whole shape of my life. What made Eli's whole trick work? What made it something I could look back on with such fondness rather than resentment? Was time. He watched me for 2 years before he ever made his first real move. He built a friendship, a real one, grounded in actual conversation about actual things, cows and books, and the ordinary texture of daily life, before he ever let romance enter into it at all. By the time those secret notes started arriving, I already knew Eli Zook as a person, not as an idea, not as a face on a screen, not as a collection of interests listed out for me to judge in a matter of seconds, but as a whole human being I had watched help his little brothers with their chores, watched sit quietly through long church services, watched laugh at things that caught him off guard. I wonder sometimes whether some of the trouble I hear about from my grandchildren and from the news my son-in-law brings home from his work in town, whether some of that trouble in modern relationships comes from skipping past that long, slow, unglamorous middle part where you simply learn who a person actually is before you decide how you feel about them. Eli's trick only worked because it was built on top of 2 years of real friendship. If he had tried the very same scheme on a girl he had only just met, it would not have been clever at all. It would have been alarming, and rightly so. The trick was not really the secret notes or the 4 weeks of buggy rides. The trick, if you want to call it that, was patience, dressed up in a clever costume. And I do not think patience is a thing that goes out of style, no matter how fast your telephones get. I say all this fully aware that I am an old woman who has never once used one of these dating applications my grandchildren described to me, and I am not foolish enough to think I understand your world better than you understand it yourselves. Perhaps there are ways to build that same slow, careful knowing of another person, even through a screen, even across a distance, If two people are willing to be patient and honest enough to let it happen naturally, rather than rushing towards something that only looks like closeness. I simply want to offer you this one thought. From somebody who has now watched a marriage built on patience hold steady for 58 years, through every kind of hardship a farm and a family can bring, however you find each other, in a barn full of singing, or in the glow of a little screen. Give the knowing enough time to become real before you build your whole future on top of it. A screen can show you a face and a few careful sentences somebody chose to share, but it cannot show you how a person treats their little brothers and sisters when nobody important is watching. And that, more than anything else I have told you tonight, is the piece of knowledge worth waiting for. However long it takes, and however old-fashioned it might sound coming from an 81-year-old woman sitting on a porch in the middle of Amish farm country. I think, too, about our own children, watching them find their own paths to marriage over the years, and it is interesting to me how differently each of them went about it, even growing up in the very same house under the very same rules. Our oldest, Elizabeth, married a steady young man named John Byler. No relation to my old Jonas as far as anyone in the family could ever work out, and theirs was about as traditional a courtship as you could imagine. The singings, the buggy rides, the slow, careful building of a life together over about 2 years. Not so different from how her father and I had done it, minus, as far as I know, any secret notes or family conspiracies. Elizabeth and John have been married 42 years now, and they have a farm not 4 miles from ours, and I see them most Sundays. Our second daughter, Mary, gave us all a bit of a scare when she went through her Rumspringa, our word for that period of running around that our young people are given before they formally join the church. A stretch of years where they are permitted more freedom to explore the outside world before deciding, for themselves, whether to be baptized into our faith and our way of life. Mary spent nearly 3 years out in the English world during her Rumspringa, working at a diner in town, wearing English clothes even, I found out much later, going to see moving pictures at the theater, which would have horrified her grandmother something fierce had she known about it at the time. We worried something terrible about Mary during those years, Eli especially. Though he did not show it the way I did, he simply grew quieter. If you can imagine that quiet man growing quieter still, and spent a good deal more time out working in the fields alone than he needed to. Which I came to understand, over the years, was simply how Eli processed worry. Through work. Through his hands, rather than through words. Mary came back to us in the end. Chose baptism. Chose our way of life, and eventually married a man named Levi Fisher. No relation to my own family, despite sharing my maiden name. Our community is small enough that these things happen more often than you might expect. And they have raised 5 children of their own. One of whom, interestingly, went through her own Rumspringa and did not come back. Chose to stay out in the English world. Married an Englishman. And lives now clear out in a place called Colorado that I have only ever seen in pictures. We love her still. We write letters. My daughter Mary visits when she is able. Our faith teaches us that the door always remains open, that love does not require agreement about every single choice a person makes with their own life, and I have come to believe that is one of the wisest things our community ever taught me. Though it took losing a granddaughter to the English world, in a manner of speaking, to really understand it in my bones. I tell you all this not to wander too far off the main story, but because I want you to understand that the world Eli and I built together, on that small farm, over 58 years, was never some kind of frozen storybook, unchanging and untouched by the wider world. It was a living thing, full of worry and change and choices we did not always agree with, and love that stretched to cover all of it anyway. And I think that is really what marriage is. At the bottom of it, whether you find your way into it through secret notes and family conspiracies, or through one of these telephone applications my grandchildren use, it is a living thing that you have to keep tending, year after year, decade after decade, long after the excitement of the courtship itself has settled into something quieter and, I would argue, something far more valuable. Let me tell you a little bit about what our life looks like now, all these years later, because I think it might surprise some of you who are picturing an 81-year-old Amish woman has some frail little thing sitting in a rocking chair all day. Eli and I no longer run the main farm ourselves. We handed that over to our youngest son, Daniel, about 12 years ago now, when Eli's knees finally told him, in no uncertain terms, that his days of hauling feed and mending fences were behind him. We live now in what we call the Dowdy House, the little grandfather house built onto the side of Daniel's home, a common arrangement in our community, where the older generation lives close enough to help and to be helped, but with a home of our own still, our own kitchen, our own rhythm to the days. Eli still gets up before the sun most mornings. Old habits do not die easily on a farm, and he still finds his way out to help with the morning chores more often than his knees probably allow. And I have given up trying to stop him. Because I learned a long time ago that a man who spent 60-some years working a farm with his own two hands does not know how to simply stop. And trying to make him stop causes him more grief than the work itself does. I spend my mornings much as I always have, though my hands move slower now than they used to, tending a smaller garden than the one I kept when we had 8 children and grandchildren running through it. Quilting most afternoons with a group of women from our district, several of whom I have known since we were girls together at that little one-room schoolhouse, which is its own kind of remarkable when you sit and think about it. Women who have known each other's whole lives, from schoolgirl to great-grandmother, sitting around the same quilting frame we have sat around for 60 years, just with more gray in our hair and more stories behind our eyes. Eli and I still argue. I will not pretend to you that 81 years of age and 58 years of marriage have made us into some kind of perfectly harmonious old couple who never cross words with each other. We argued just last week about whether he needed to see the English doctor about a cough that has been hanging on longer than either of us liked. And I won that argument. And he went, grumbling the whole way there and the whole way back, and the doctor gave him a course of medicine that has cleared the cough right up, which I remind him of at least once a day now. Because after 58 years, a woman is entitled to a little bit of gloating when she turns out to be right. But underneath the arguing, underneath the aching knees and the stubborn coughs, and all the small frictions that come with two people sharing a life for so many decades, there is still that same steady thing I recognized in that sawmill so many years ago, standing there in the sawdust while a quiet boy explained to me, plain as day, exactly why he had spent 2 years arranging my whole life around a truth he understood. Before I did. Every evening, after supper, Eli and I sit together on the little porch of our Dowdy house, weather permitting, and most evenings we do not talk very much at all. We simply sit, the way we did that night after we buried our little Amish, his hand finding mine without either of us really deciding to reach for the other. And I have come to believe that this quiet, unremarkable, ordinary sitting together is really the whole point of everything. The notes and the buggy rides and the family conspiracies and the 58 years of raising children and burying parents and building a life, all of it was really just the long, winding road toward being able to sit quietly beside somebody at the end of a long day, at the end of a long life, and know, without one shadow of doubt, that you are exactly where you are meant to be. I want to take a little time now to speak directly to those of you watching this who might be young, or might be searching for love yourselves, whether you are Amish or English or anywhere in between. Because I have thought a good deal, especially in these later years, about what wisdom, if any, an old woman like me might have to offer somebody just starting out on that road. I do not claim to have all the answers. Understand, I am only one old woman who happened to marry a particularly patient and particularly clever man, and I do not think my story is a template anybody should try to copy exactly. Secret notes and family conspiracies and all. But there are a few things I have come to believe are true. Across all the years and all the changes I have witnessed in this world, and I would like to share them with you now. If you will indulge an old woman a little longer. The first thing I would tell you is this. Pay attention to who watches you when you are not performing for anybody. Eli fell in love with me, by his own account, by watching how I was with my little brothers and sisters when I thought nobody important was looking. Not how I acted at the singings, all done up and hoping to catch Jonas Byler's eye, but how I was in the ordinary, unguarded moments of my life. I think a lot of people in every generation spend so much energy trying to be noticed for their best, most polished self that they forget the people worth marrying are usually the ones who fall in love with your most ordinary self. The tired self, the frustrated self, the self with flour on her apron and a baby on her hip, and no time at all to be charming. Find the person who watches that version of you and still decides you are the one they want to grow old with. That is worth more than 100 grand romantic gestures. The second thing I would tell you is that patience is not the same thing as passivity. I know it might sound, from parts of this story, like Eli simply sat back quietly for 2 years and waited for things to fall into place. But that is not really what happened. Eli was working, the whole time, quietly and deliberately, towards something he wanted. He simply understood that the work needed to be patient work, not rushed work. There is a difference between waiting around hoping something good will happen to you and patiently building the conditions where something good becomes possible. My husband was never once passive in his pursuit of me. He was simply patient. And I have come to believe that patience, real patience, active patience, is one of the rarest and most valuable qualities a person can bring into a relationship, whether you are 17 years old in an Amish church district or 27 years old, with one of these telephone applications on your screen. The third thing I would tell you, and I think this might be the most important one, is do not be afraid of a love that reveals you to yourself rather than simply flattering you. I spent a good deal of my early youth chasing after Jonas Byler, who was handsome and charming, and made me feel, in the moment, wonderful about myself, the way flattery always does. But Jonas never once, in all our brief interactions, showed me anything true about who I was. He simply reflected back whatever I already wanted to believe about myself in that moment. Eli was different. Eli's whole courtship of me, tricky as it was fundamentally an act of seeing me clearly, more clearly than I saw myself, and helping me see that same clear picture. That kind of love is harder to recognize at first, because it does not always feel as exciting or as flattering as the other kind. But I promise you, if you find somebody who sees you clearly and loves what they see, hold on to that person with both hands, because that is a rarer and more durable thing than all the excitement in the world. I want to tell you what happened to Jonas Byler, because I know some of you have been wondering, and I think it rounds out this story in a way that matters. Jonas married Fanny Lapp that same year Eli and I were published, and by all accounts theirs was a good marriage too. A different kind of good than mine, but good all the same. Jonas and Fanny raised a large family, ran a successful horse farm that grew to be one of the largest in 3 districts. And Jonas became, over the years, exactly the kind of respected, well-liked community elder that his easy charm as a young man had always suggested he might become. We were neighbors, in the loose way that everyone in our district was neighbors, for over 50 years. Sat across from each other at countless church services and funerals and weddings, and I want to tell you, there was never one moment of awkwardness between us about our brief history as teenagers. That is simply not how these things work in a community as small and as interconnected as ours. You cannot hold on to old romantic disappointments when you are going to be sitting across the table from the person at every single gathering for the rest of your natural life. You learn to let it go, and mostly, you learn to laugh about it. In fact, and I think this is a fitting little detail to end that particular thread of the story with, Jonas Byler was one of the pallbearers at Eli's father's funeral, years and years ago now. The 2 men having become, over the decades, genuine friends through their shared work on various community projects, barn raisings and the like. And I remember watching them carry that casket together. 2 old men who had once, in their own very different ways, both wanted the same 17-year-old girl, working together in perfect solemn cooperation, and thinking to myself that this, more than almost anything else, was the real proof of how a small community heals whatever small wounds get made along the way to building the lives we are meant to build. Jonas passed away himself about 6 years ago now, his heart giving out while he was out working his own fields, which I think honestly is exactly how he would have wanted to go. And I sat at his funeral, an old woman remembering a girl who once thought her whole future depended on this man's attention, and I felt nothing but gratitude for him, for the life he built, and for the very different life that his choosing Fanny Lap instead of me had allowed me to build with Eli. I share that with you because I think it matters to understand that this story I have told you tonight is not really a story about winning some competition between 2 suitors. It is not a story about Eli triumphing over Jonas for my affections, though I suppose in the most literal sense that is exactly what happened. It is a story about how the life you are meant to live has a way of finding you, sometimes through your own clear choices, and sometimes, as in my case, through the patient, clever, occasionally exasperating efforts of somebody who saw that life more clearly than you did yourself, and simply refused to let you wander too far away from it. I would be leaving out an important part of this story if I did not talk a little about faith. Because in our community, faith is not a separate compartment of life set apart from everything else. It is the water we swim in, the air we breathe. It shapes how we think about marriage and courtship and everything else, just as much as it shapes how we think about Sunday mornings. When I look back on Eli's whole scheme, the notes, the buggy rides, the quiet conversations with his mother at their kitchen table, I do not see it now as simply a clever bit of teenage strategy. I see it as an act of faith, in the deepest sense of that word. Eli believed at 16 years old that the Lord had shown him something true about his life, about the woman he was meant to grow old with, and he acted on that belief with a kind of patient, humble confidence that I think many people, myself included, spend their whole lives trying to cultivate and rarely manage to hold on to as steadily as he did. Our faith teaches us that marriage is not primarily about our own happiness. Though, of course, happiness is a wonderful gift when it comes. It is about building a life of mutual service, of raising children in the fear and admonition of the Lord, of supporting the wider community in all the countless quiet ways that a healthy church district depends on, The barn raisings, the meal trains when somebody falls ill, the quilting frolics that raise money for families facing hardship. Eli's whole courtship of me, when I look back on it through this lens, was never really about winning me for himself in some selfish sense. It was about him recognizing, through prayer and observation and whatever quiet conversations he had with the Lord out there, working the sawmill day after day, that a life built together with me was a life that would serve God and serve our community well. And he pursued that recognition with the same steady faithfulness he brought to everything else in his life. I do not say this to make our story sound more pious than it really was. Understand, there was plenty of ordinary teenage foolishness and vanity and wounded pride tangled up in the whole business too, on both our parts. But underneath all of that ordinary human mess, I do believe there was something more, something that our community would call the Lord's leading, and I have come to be deeply grateful, in my old age, that Eli trusted that leading enough to act on it, even when the 16-year-old girl he had set his sights on gave him every reason, over those 2 long years, to doubt whether his patience would ever be rewarded. I think about mortality more than I used to, which I suppose is only natural for a woman who has already outlived both of her parents by several decades and watched most of her own generation of friends and cousins pass on ahead of her. Eli and I have talked, in that quiet way we talk about most serious things, about which of us is likely to go first. And neither of us has any illusions that we have all that many more years left to us, not at 81 and 82 years of age, no matter how stubbornly Eli still insists on getting up before the sun to help with chores his knees can no longer really handle. I will tell you honestly, the thought of losing him frightens me more than almost anything else I can imagine, more than it frightened me when we lost our little Amish, more than it frightened me during any of the hard years of illness or drought or worry that a farm life inevitably brings. 58 years is a long time to build your whole understanding of what a day looks like around the presence of one particular person, and I do not know, honestly, how I will manage the shape of my days without him when that time comes, as it must, for one of us before too very long. But I will tell you what gets me through those frightening late-night thoughts, when they come, which they do, more often now than they used to. I think about that 16-year-old boy, standing in his father's sawmill, telling his father with such quiet, unshakable confidence that he had already decided who he was going to marry, though she did not know it yet. I think about the 2 years of patient watching and quiet notes and careful, unhurried courtship that followed that declaration. I think about 58 years of supper tables and hard winters and buried children and grown grandchildren and quiet evenings on a porch. His hand finding mine without either of us deciding to reach for the other. And I understand, in those late-night frightened moments, that whatever time we have left, however much or however little that turns out to be, we have already built something that does not simply end when one of us stops breathing. We built a family, 6 children, and their children, and their children's children, all of them carrying forward some small piece of what Eli and I built together, starting in a sawdust-covered mill more than 60 years ago. We built a life inside a community that will remember us, will tell our story, perhaps the very way I am telling it to you tonight. For generations after we are both gone, whatever trick my husband played on a stubborn 17-year-old girl all those years ago, it built something that I do not believe death has the power to fully undo, and that thought, more than any other, is what lets me sleep at night. Even now, even with the fear that comes with loving someone this much for this long, knowing that all things on this earth must eventually come to their end. If I could go back and speak to that 17-year-old girl standing in the sawdust of the Zook family sawmill, furious and confused and secretly deeply relieved all at the same time, I think I would tell her to stop worrying quite so much about whether she had been tricked, and to start paying closer attention to what the trick had revealed. I would tell her that the anger she felt in that first moment, the sense of having been managed, of having her own community move ahead of her own understanding of her own heart, that anger was not wrong to feel. It was a healthy and appropriate response to discovering that other people had been quietly shaping her circumstances without her full knowledge. But I would also tell her that anger is not the same thing as wisdom, and that the wise thing to do with that anger was exactly what she ended up doing, which was to sit with it, to ask hard questions of the young man responsible for it, to listen honestly to his answers, and then to make her own clear-eyed choice about whether the path he had built led somewhere she actually wanted to go. I would tell her, too, that the mysterious notes she spent that whole winter trying to decode were never really about Jonas Byler, or about romance in the abstract, exciting sense she imagined at 16. They were about a boy, and eventually a whole family, seeing something true in her, and finding, however roundabout the method, a way to help her see it too. I would tell her that this is, in the end, one of the greatest gifts one person can give another. Not flattery, not excitement, not grand romantic gestures performed for an audience, but simply the patient, sustained effort of helping somebody else see their own life more clearly than they were able to see it on their own. And I would tell her one more thing, something I did not fully understand until I was a good deal older than 17, which is that love built through patience and cleverness, and even a little bit of family conspiracy, is not somehow lesser than love that arrives in one dramatic, unmistakable moment. I used to believe, as a young girl reading whatever books I could get my hands on, that real love announced itself boldly, all at once, undeniable from the very first meeting. I have come to believe, after 58 years of marriage to a man who spent 2 entire years quietly building toward the moment he finally asked me home, that real love is far more often a slow accumulation, note by note, conversation by conversation, buggy ride by buggy ride, until one day you look up and realize the whole architecture of your life has been rearranged around a person you did not even fully notice moving in. Let me tell you a little more about our actual wedding day itself, because I skipped over a lot of the details earlier in this story, and I think they are worth sharing, especially for those of you watching from outside our community who might be curious what an Amish wedding actually looks like. We do not marry in June the way so many English couples seem to prefer. At least not traditionally. We marry in the fall, after the harvest is in, when there is a natural lull in the farm work and the whole community has more time to gather and celebrate properly. My wedding day started, as all our wedding days do, very early, with a church service that ran a full 3 hours, hymns sung slowly in our old High German dialect, a style of singing so unhurried that a single hymn can take 20 minutes or more to work through. And I remember sitting on the bench in my new dress, dark blue, the color our brides traditionally wear, not white the way English brides do, feeling my heart pound through every single verse, watching Eli across the room on the men's side, looking, for the first time in the 2 years I had known him, genuinely nervous himself, which I confess gave me no small amount of satisfaction after everything he had put me through. The ceremony itself, when it finally came near the end of that long service, was simple and solemn. The bishop asking us both, in turn, whether we believed the Lord had ordained this union, whether we would remain faithful to each other in sickness and in health until death. the same vows, more or less, that I imagine couples make in every tradition and every era, though ours were spoken in German and witnessed by 200 people who had known us both since before we could walk. There was no ring exchanged. We do not wear wedding rings in our tradition, considering them a form of jewelry that runs counter to our commitment to a plain and humble life. Our marriage marked instead by the simple fact of standing together before the whole community and being pronounced husband and wife. After the service came the meal. And I want to tell you, the meal at an Amish wedding is an event unto itself. Chicken roast and mashed potatoes and creamed celery, which is a peculiar tradition specific to weddings that I have never fully understood the origin of, but have loved my whole life anyway. And every kind of pie you could imagine, chouflé and apple and cherry and pumpkin, laid out on tables that stretched the length of my parents' yard. Eli and I sat at what we call the Eck, the corner table specially set for the bride and groom, decorated more elaborately than the rest. And I remember looking out over that whole yard full of people who had come to celebrate us. Cousins and neighbors, and the whole youth group I had grown up singing beside every Sunday evening for years, and feeling, for the first time in my young life, truly and completely certain that I was exactly where I was meant to be. All my earlier confusion about tricks and manipulation and stubborn pride settling, finally, into something like peace. We did not go on any kind of honeymoon the way English couples do. That is not our custom. Instead, we spent the weeks following our wedding visiting relatives, staying overnight with different aunts and uncles and cousins throughout the district, a custom meant to formally introduce the new couple to the wider extended family and to give the young bride a chance to see up close how different households in the community managed their affairs, picking up little pieces of wisdom from each visit that would serve her in her own home for years to come. I remember those weeks of visiting as some of the happiest of my entire life. Eli and I riding together in his buggy from farm to farm, still getting to know each other in all the small ways that only living together, even temporarily under someone else's roof, can teach you. Discovering that he snored something terrible when he had a cold. Discovering that I talked in my sleep sometimes. Nonsense mostly. Though he liked to tease me for years afterward about one night, I apparently gave a very stern lecture in my sleep about the proper way to can green beans. Let me tell you one more story before I get to the traditions that carried us all the way to today, because I think it shows another side of Eli that the trick of our courtship does not fully capture. About 15 years into our marriage, when our children were still young, a terrible storm came through in the middle of the night and took the roof clean off our neighbor's barn, the Hostetler family, who lived about 2 miles down the road from us and had 4 young children of their own and a herd of dairy cows that needed shelter before the next storm came through, which the weather signs suggested would be within the week. Word went out through the district before the sun was even fully up that morning, the way word always traveled in our community back then, neighbor telling neighbor. And by noon that same day, there were over 60 men gathered on the Hostetler property, Eli among them, ready to raise a brand new barn from nothing but lumber and will, and the kind of coordinated effort that still amazes me to this day when I think back on it. I was there too, of course, along with every other woman in the district, because a barn raising is not just a man's work, it is a whole community's work. The women cooking enough food to feed 60 hungry men through a full day of hard labor, watching each other's children, keeping the whole operation running smoothly behind the scenes the way we always did and still do. I remember standing at one of the long tables set up in the Hostetler yard, slicing what felt like an endless mountain of bread, and looking up every so often to watch the frame of that barn rising, plank by plank, beam by beam, an entire structure taking shape in a single day, through nothing more than dozens of ordinary people deciding, together, that a family in need deserved their help. Eli worked on the roof crew that day, which was, I will tell you honestly, the most dangerous position in the whole operation, and I spent a good part of that afternoon glancing up nervously every few minutes to make sure he had not fallen. Until my sister Katie finally took me by the arm and told me to stop fretting and finish slicing the bread, that Eli Zook had never once in his whole life fallen off anything he had climbed onto. And she was right. He had not. And he did not that day either. By evening, as the sun was going down, there stood a brand new barn where nothing but wreckage had stood that morning. And I remember watching Eli walk toward me across that yard, covered head to toe in sawdust and sweat, looking more tired than I had seen him look in years. And I remember thinking, watching him walk toward me, that this, more than the sawmill confession, more than the wedding day, more than almost any other single moment in our whole marriage, was the clearest picture I ever had of exactly who I had married. A man who would spend 2 full years, quietly, patiently working to win a stubborn girl's heart, and who would spend a full day of back-breaking labor, without a single complaint, helping a neighbor family he was not even particularly close friends with, simply because that is what our community does for each other, and because that is who Eli Zook has always been. Underneath all the quiet and all the cleverness, a man who shows up every single time for the people who need him. I want to tell you about one more tradition before I bring this story to a close, because I think it captures something important about how Eli and I have kept our marriage alive across all these decades. Every year, on the anniversary of that evening in the sawmill, not our wedding anniversary, mind you, but the anniversary of the evening he finally explained himself to me among the sawdust and the evening light, Eli has done the very same small thing, without fail, for 64 years running. He brings me a single pressed flower, tucked into whatever book I happen to be reading at the time, the very same gesture his mother suggested to him all those years ago for that first secret note. The one pressed between the pages of my Bible at the Book of Ruth. He has never once explained why he continues the tradition, and I have never once asked him to, because some things I have come to believe are better left as a quiet understanding between 2 people than spoken aloud and picked apart for their meaning. I still have every single one of those flowers, 64 of them now, pressed carefully into a large book my daughter Elizabeth gave me for that very purpose years ago, each one dated in Eli's careful, deliberate handwriting on the page beside it. A whole garden's worth of anniversaries, spanning more than 6 decades of marriage. I take that book down sometimes, on quiet afternoons when Eli is out working the fields he is no longer really supposed to be working, and I turn through the pages, watching the flowers change with the years. A wildflower from a hard drought year when nothing much was blooming. A rose from the year our first grandchild was born. A simple clover from the year we buried Eli's father. And I think, every single time, about that 16-year-old boy standing in his father's sawmill, telling his own father, with such quiet, unshakable certainty, that he had already decided who he was going to marry. He did not know, standing there in his youth, the full shape of the life that decision would build, the 8 children and 6 grandchildren, and however many great-grandchildren we are up to counting now. I confess I sometimes lose track. The 58 years of suppers and arguments and quiet porch evenings, the whole long garden of pressed flowers that would come to mark our years together. But he trusted, at 16 years old, that whatever shape that life took, it was the shape he wanted. And I have spent 64 years now being endlessly grateful that his patient, clever, occasionally exasperating trust turned out to be exactly right. I started making these videos, if you are curious, because my granddaughter, the one who left our community for the English world, the one who lives clear out in Colorado now, was the one who first suggested it to me. She came to visit 2 summers ago, and we sat up late one night, the way we always do when she visits, talking about family history. And she said, "Grandma, you have to tell these stories to more people. They are too good to just disappear when you are gone." I laughed at her at first, told her an 81-year-old Amish woman had no business making videos for the whole world to watch on the telephone. But she persisted. The way that particular granddaughter always has persisted about everything since she was a small girl. And eventually, she set up this little arrangement for me. Taught me, patient as anything, how to work the equipment. And now she edits these together for me from clear out in Colorado, and I sit here in my dowdy house, with Eli usually somewhere in the next room pretending he is not listening to every word, and I tell you these old stories, the way I might tell them to my own grandchildren gathered around after a Sunday meal. Except now, apparently, thousands of you get to gather around and listen too. From places I will never see with my own eyes. Cities and countries I only know from the maps my granddaughter shows me on her telephone when she visits. I want to tell you, it still amazes me, every single time I sit down to record one of these, that people from so far away, living such different lives than mine, want to hear an old Amish woman talk about her marriage, and her farm, and her family. I do not have any particular wisdom that the rest of the world lacks. I am simply a woman who has lived a long time and paid attention along the way. The same as any of you could do if you take the time to notice the shape of your own life as it happens, rather than only looking back on it with regret for not having noticed sooner. But I am deeply grateful, every single time, for every one of you who takes the time to watch, and to comment, and to sit with an old woman's stories for however many minutes you can spare from your own busy lives. So here we are, near the end of this long story, and I want to thank you, sincerely, for staying with me through the whole thing, through the secret notes, and the 4 weeks of buggy rides and the funeral confession, and everything in between. I hope, whatever your own circumstances, whatever your own story of love or the search for it looks like, that something in Eli's patient, clever, occasionally exasperating pursuit of a stubborn 17-year-old girl gave you something worth carrying with you, whether that is patience with your own path toward love, or a little more grace for the people in your life who might be working quietly, in their own imperfect ways, to help you see something true about yourself that you have not fully recognized yet. Before you go, I am going to ask you one more time, because it truly does mean the world to this old woman and to my granddaughter who works so hard putting these videos together for me. If this story moved you even a little, please tap that like button right now, before you forget. If you have not subscribed yet, please do, because I have so many more stories to tell you. Stories about the barn that burned down the year our 3rd daughter was born. Stories about the terrible winter of 1978 that nearly broke every farm in our district. Stories about my own mother and her own remarkable courtship that I have not told a single soul outside my family until now, and I would love nothing more than to have you sitting right here with me again when I share them. And please, before you click away to whatever comes next, leave me a comment and tell me where you are watching this from tonight. I truly do read every single one, and there is something so wonderful at 81 years old, sitting in my little dowdy house in the middle of Amish farm country, about knowing that my little life story reached somebody sitting in a city or a country I will never get to visit myself. I sewed my own wedding dress that autumn, the way every Amish bride does. A dark blue fabric my mother helped me choose from the dry goods store in town. And I remember my hands shaking so badly the first few evenings I sat down to work on it that my older sister Katie finally took the needle from me and said, "Naomi, you cannot sew a straight seam while you are still deciding whether you are angry at that boy or in love with him. Finish deciding first, then finish the dress." She was right, of course. Older sisters usually are. And once I had made my peace with everything Eli had done, once I had walked away from that sawmill with my answer settled firmly in my heart, the sewing came easy after that. Evening after evening by lamplight, each stitch feeling less like an obligation and more like a promise I was making to myself as much as to him. I still have that dress, packed away carefully in a cedar chest in our Dodie house. And every so often, on the anniversary of our wedding, I take it out and hold it up and marvel at how small I once was, and how much living those careful stitches went on to witness. Thank you for spending this time with me tonight. Eli is calling me for supper now, which means this old woman needs to go see what trouble he has gotten himself into in the kitchen. 62 years of marriage, and he still cannot properly time a pot roast. Bless his heart. 62 years of marriage, counted from that first buggy ride. Though I suppose by now you understand well enough why I sometimes lose track of which anniversary I am supposed to be counting from. The buggy rides or the wedding, or that evening in the sawmill. There have been so many beginnings tucked inside this one long marriage that an old woman can be forgiven for mixing up her dates every now and again. Until next time, take care of yourselves, and take care of the people who see you clearly and love you anyway. The ones who watch you when you think nobody important is looking and decide, quietly and patiently, that you are worth the wait. That, more than anything else I have told you tonight, is the whole secret to the life Eli and I have built together. One last thing before I let you go tonight. My granddaughter tells me that people like to know these little details, so I will give you this one. If you ever find yourself doubting whether patience really pays off in matters of the heart, whether waiting quietly for the right person, or being brave enough to quietly build toward the right person, is worth all the uncertainty it asks of you, I want you to remember an old woman sitting on a porch in Amish country, holding the hand of the same man who tricked her into marrying him 64 years ago, still glad, every single evening, that he did. That is not a small thing to be able to say after so many decades, and I do not take one single day of it for granted. Not the hard years, not the easy years, not one supper, not one argument, not one quiet evening on the porch. Whatever your own story looks like, wherever you are in your own search for that kind of steady, patient, clear-eyed love, I hope you find your way to it, in whatever form it comes to you. Secret notes or telephone applications, or something else entirely that has not even been invented yet. God bless you all, and I will see you in the next story.